Hello, Network to Code community. My name is Tim Fayola. I'm a developer advocate here at Network to Code, and today we're going to be talking about Nautobot's data validation plugin. Here's the agenda we'll be following. Short and sweet. We're going to talk about what it is, what it does. We're going to do a demo on the public sandbox, and then we're going to wrap up with a few details. The purpose of the data validation plugin is to let the user set some constraints on the data within Nautobot. Typically, these are going to be business constraints. These constraints include use of regular expressions for text fields or min-max rules for numeric fields for data within Nautobot. Regular expressions allow for specific formatting of text fields. You can put a constraint for something like device names or VRF names. Min-max rules allow for constraints for numeric fields. For example, the VLAN ID must be within a certain range. So let us go right ahead and get straight to the demo. I'm going to be demoing today from the Nautobot public sandbox, demo.nautobot.com. So you can feel free to come in afterwards and try the same type of exercise for yourself. First, we'll go over to plugins, and notice that when you click on plugins, we see the data validation engine is installed, and there's two types of rules like we talked about. There's a min-max rules and a regex rules. Let's go ahead and first take a look at min-max rules. So the example we have configured here is putting a constraint on the VLAN ID, the VLAN number. This constraint is saying it must be 200 or above, yet 3,999 or below. It's got to be in that range. If it doesn't, we'll see an error message when we're trying to configure it saying that the VLAN ID must be in this range inclusive. Let's now go ahead and take a look at a regex rule. So the configured example we have here concerns device names. So we're putting a constraint on the name field for a device saying the name must comply to this regular expression. And I know that's tough to read right now. I'll go ahead and put an example of a compliant expression on the screen here. And then if we try to configure a device that doesn't meet that, we get this error message that we configured as well. Okay, let's now go ahead and try to go ahead and configure a new regular expression constraint. So we'll go ahead and click Add, and we'll go ahead and name this VRF name format as our name. The content type, this is telling us, this is asking us for what type of content are we restricting, and we're restricting the VRF. We're putting a restriction on the VRF, so we scroll down to IPAM VRF. And the specific field we're going to constrain is name of the VRF. And the regular expression we're going to use is this one that I'm going to paste here. So you don't have to watch me try and struggle to type this real time. This is the constraint we're going to put on the VRF name. And then for an error message, we'll say VRF name must comply with the regular expression. We'll go ahead and create that. And there we go. Now let's go ahead and try and configure a VRF that violates this constraint. So we will go up to IPAM, and we'll go to VRF, and we're just going to go straight to add a VRF. And we're going to name this VRF BKK regional VRF. And for a VRF, the only thing you have to configure is a name. So we'll just go ahead and leave the rest of the other details unconfigured, and we'll hit create. Okay, now it's given us the error message that we configured. It's the VRF name must comply with that regular expression. So we'll go ahead and make it comply by removing the last three letters and go ahead and hit create. And there we go. Our VRF got created. Great. Now, one thing we also want to talk about when we're talking about these constraints is they are not retroactive, meaning if you have a device that has attributes and then you configure a new rule, a new constraint for the validation, that constraint will not be retroactive. So that device that doesn't comply anymore will not be flagged. So that's one detail to know. However, we're going to walk through an interesting example here of a non-compliant device must be updated to comply when you edit the device. So what do I mean by that? Let's best explain that with an example. So what we'll go ahead and do here is we will go to VLANs, and notice here that our constraint says the VLAN must be between 200 and this number right up here. So let's go ahead and let's look at our VLANs. Great. We have a ton of VLANs here with the ID of 99. Notice they're not flagged. There's nothing flagging them as non-compliant. However, when I go in to edit a VLAN, let's take this first example here, and we'll hit edit. And notice that it has an ID of 99, which is not compliant with our rule. So if we want to go in here, we're not going to touch the ID, but let's say we want to change the name to management 1. Just add a -1 on the end of the name. So we haven't touched the ID. And when we go down here to try and update it, oh, whoops, we got to do this. Got to say it's active. And then when we go down here and try and update it, it flags it. So this VLAN object was not compliant after that new constraint was configured, and nothing was flagged. However, when we try and edit this VLAN now, it's going to, if we even if we try and edit something like the name, the ID is going to be flagged as non-compliant. So we'll either have to change this VLAN ID or skip our modification. Well, this concludes the demo. Now let's get back to the presentation and wrap up a few details. Additional information can be found at the Data Validation plugin repository on GitHub. This wraps up the presentation. Thank you for your time, and feel free to try this out on one of the instances of the Nautobot public sandboxes as well. Thank you, and have a great day.